They say a people without memory are a people doomed to repeat forgetting. Imagine every pot stirring, every spice crushed, every meal prepared in love by black hands, all erased, unseen, uncredited, treated as shame. This isn't just cooking. This is culture. And in America, black food, the backbone of what generations cooked, what generations survived on, has been erased. But who erased it? And why have we let it be buried in silence? You're eating today a bite of cornbread, collard greens simmering, sweet potato pie melting on your tongue. But here's the truth. Almost every dish in front of you has roots in stolen land, stolen labor, stolen history. Your mouth is tasting resilience. But your textbooks? They rarely mention that black cooks created icons like gumbo, pepper pot, okra, or the foods deemed comfort food. They're called Southern or country, never owned as black. From the moment enslaved Africans were forced off of ships, their knowledge, their recipes, their seed crops, their flavor profiles was taken, distorted, appropriated, and suppressed. This is not just about hunger. This is about silence. The story begins long before cotton fields and plantation kitchens. The soul of black food grows from Africa, from West African gardens filled with yams, okra, black-eyed peas, rice, the crops and flavors that enslaved people carried with them in memory. These foodways were more than recipes. They were survival, medicinal, spiritual. Once enslaved, people were given the scraps, the offal, the leftover fats, the rejected parts of meats. But they transformed it. Pig's feet, hog jowls, chitlins. Foods no one else wanted became feasts in small cabins. Stews and pots hung over low fires. Greens flavored with pork fat. Cornmeal cooked into bread or pone. The enslaved women who cooked did so with ingenuity, with spice, with the care of mothers, grandmothers, community healers. These dishes were born of deprivation. Yes, but more, of resistance, of memory. When the Great Migration spread black families north, soul food traveled with them, carried in trunks, in memories, in voices whispering recipes by candlelight. Here's where the erasure begins. White America enjoyed the food, the barbecue, the stews, the fried chicken, and yet refused to credit its creators. Black cooks were enslaved or servants, and their names seldom documented. Often food was credited as Southern cooking, with vague nods to tradition, never acknowledging that many dishes came from black kitchens, not just from local or Southern non-black homes. Advertisements codified stereotypes, black people serving servitude, simple flavors. Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, faces and characters that reduce black food history to caricature. Meanwhile, cookbooks by black women like Frida DeKnight weren't weighted with prestige. They were sidelined. When Ebony's Test Kitchen existed, they were testing these recipes, but because it was black work, it was often devalued and then hidden. During Jim Crow, when black Americans had to eat in their own neighborhoods if they could, soul food restaurants became centers of community, but were nearly always under-resourced, undercapitalized, seen as cheap eats. Meanwhile, wealthy white patrons and food critics would romanticize Southern cuisine while ignoring or obscuring the black hands behind the stove. But Erasure did not win. Hidden names were preserved in recipe books, in church dinners, in the cooking of grandmothers. In 1962, Sylvia Woods opens her soul food restaurant in Harlem, becoming a pillar in black culinary identity. Black chefs and food historians worked to restore credit, to remind America that okra, gumbo, pepper pot, yams, collard greens are lineage. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture features black foodways as a central exhibit. The Sweet Home Cafe inside it doesn't just serve food. It tells a story, places the recipes next to stories of enslaved cooks, migratory cookbooks, tools, seeds. When history is curated this way, food becomes proof. Proof that black lives, black creativity, black survival mattered. Historians have uncovered receipt books, old cookbooks used by enslaved cooks, that show African-inspired dishes like okra stew or pepper pot being prepared. These records survived in antique books, letters, diaries. But as America moved into industrialization and media culture, many of these records were ignored, lost, or placed outside mainstream narrative. Erasing black food does not simply erase flavor. It erases identity. When younger generations don't see their food stories taught, don't see their grandma's recipes preserved, identity fragments. When soul food is only shown in fast food stereotypes, when it's whispered of as unhealthy without understanding its roots, shame creeps in. Health, diet-related illnesses, high blood pressure, diabetes, are real problems in Black communities. But what if the problem isn't just sugar or fat, but disconnection from traditional, healthier versions of Black food? When the narrative focuses only on how soul food is bad for you, not on how it was originally made with fresh vegetables, herbs, balancing ingenuity, that erases healthier pasts and limits healthier futures. Memory. Food ties you to ancestors, to the fields they labored in, the kitchens they cooked in, the rituals of harvest and harvest festivals, the church suppers. When those rituals are ignored in history books, people grow up believing those foods are just peasant food, which means the stories behind them are forgotten. And without stories, cultures lose strength. Now a fight is on. Black chefs are reclaiming narrative. Food historians like Jessica Harris, Adrian Miller, Twitty, and others are writing books, hosting exhibits, restoring recipes, reclaiming what was taken. They insist that soul food not be sanitized, that its roots in labor and resistance be honored. Restaurants owned by Black entrepreneurs are pushing authenticity, heirloom greens, revitalizing old seed stocks, using fresh produce instead of processed, teaching cooking methods that preserve tradition. Media is beginning to pay attention. Documentaries, museum exhibits, scholarly journals now highlight Black foodways. But still there is resistance. People who want to flatten these stories, to reduce them to taste without histories, flavors without people. So why has Black food been erased? Because it challenged systems, slavery, segregation, racist marketing, and cultural appropriation. Because owning food culture means owning identity. Because what gets written down in histories, what gets preserved in museums, what gets taught in schools, it isn't neutral. Whoever tells a story controls identity. We are rediscovering recipes, unearthing names, pushing them into the light. But the most important hidden ingredient is truth. We will reveal the lost cookbooks, the forgotten names of Black women whose recipes shaped what all of America eats. Names wiped from records. We'll uncover legal battles, corporate appropriation, and a shadowy network of branding deals that profit from Black food while hiding who made it. And we'll ask, as America finally names the roots, who will claim the credit and who will keep taking it? They say the dead speak through what we choose to remember and what we choose to erase. We were left with a critical question. Who really gets credit for Black food? And the answer lies not just in kitchens, but in cookbooks. Lost, stolen, hidden cookbooks that carry the names of Black women whose recipes shaped America, only for their names to be wiped clean from history. Imagine this. You walk into a library archive, dust thick on the shelves. You open a leather-bound book from the 1800s. Inside are recipes, gumbo, pepper pot, sweet corn fritters. But the author's name on the cover? A wealthy white mistress of a plantation. Yet turn the pages, and in the margins you see faint notes in different handwriting. That handwriting belonged to the enslaved Black woman who actually cooked those meals. She had no cover credit, no royalties, no acknowledgement. Her knowledge was stolen, published under someone else's name. That's how the erasure worked. Through publishing, through branding, through theft disguised as ownership. Historians digging through archives have found countless receipt books from wealthy white families. Almost every one of them contains African-influenced recipes, okra stews, pepper sauces, rice-based dishes. But the cooks, Black women in the kitchens, never got their names listed. Instead, recipes were credited to the house or the white mistress. One shocking example. In 1824, Mary Randolph published The Virginia Housewife, one of the most famous cookbooks of the early 19th century. It became a culinary classic, shaping what was considered American cuisine. But behind those recipes were enslaved cooks, recipes Randolph published as her own. Okra stews, spice meats, gumbo variations were directly tied to West African traditions. Yet Randolph profited, while the women who created the flavors remained nameless. And Mary Randolph wasn't alone. Plantation cookbooks across Virginia, South Carolina, and Louisiana took enslaved people's knowledge and rebranded it as refined Southern cooking. America's first celebrity chefs, in truth, were enslaved black women and men, but their names were erased. The theft didn't stop with books. As America entered the age of advertising, black food was marketed, but only through caricatures. Think of Aunt Jemima, created in 1889, a smiling mammy caricature used to sell pancake mix, rooted in minstrel stereotypes. The brand became one of the most recognizable faces in American history. But the actual recipe innovations came from real black cooks whose names we will never know. Aunt Jemima wasn't a person. It was a marketing mask that made billions for white-owned corporations while reducing black culinary heritage to a stereotype. Uncle Ben's rice followed the same pattern. A fictional servant's face to market a staple crop. Black bodies turned into symbols, while white-owned companies collected profits. Corporate America commodified black food, while simultaneously making black chefs invisible. By the mid-20th century, as black entrepreneurs tried to publish cookbooks and open restaurants, they often faced legal barriers. Publishers rejected their work as niche, claiming the mainstream audience wouldn't buy black-authored cookbooks. When Frida DeKnight, Ebony magazine's first food editor, published her 1948 book A Date with a Dish, it was groundbreaking. The first national cookbook by an African-American chef. But while it was a hit with black readers, mainstream critics ignored it. Meanwhile, corporations quietly bought up black recipes to sell as all-American comfort food. Some black women working as domestic cooks even had to sign away rights to their recipes, ensuring the white families they worked for could publish them without challenge. This wasn't just about food. It was about ownership. And ownership meant money. Black chefs created dishes, but white publishers and companies cashed the checks. The system ran deeper than most realize. Take barbecue, for example. Black pit masters were the backbone of Southern barbecue culture from the 1700s through the 1900s. They invented slow smoking methods, sauce blends, flavor layering. Yet by the time barbecue became mainstream, many restaurants selling it were white-owned businesses that learned from black cooks but erased their presence. Or take fine dining. For years, French-trained chefs were glorified in America's culinary schools. Yet enslaved black chefs like James Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's enslaved cook trained in France, introduced French cuisine to America decades earlier. Hemings brought macaroni and cheese, creme brulee, and French fries to this country. But in most history books, Jefferson gets a credit, while Hemings' name was almost lost to time. This shadow network of learning from black cooks, then erasing them, built America's food identity on theft. Today, historians and chefs are working to break the silence. Michael Twitty's A Cooking Gene traced how African-American food shaped the South. Jessica Harris's High on the Hog showed the direct link from Africa to America's kitchens. Netflix even turned Harris's work into a documentary series, revealing stories of how enslaved chefs shaped U.S. cuisine. But here's the catch. Even now, recognition battles continue. Black chefs in fine dining often struggle to be taken seriously unless they abandon soul food for French or Italian styles. Black-owned restaurants still face discrimination in bank loans and media coverage. And many younger black Americans are disconnected from their food heritage, seeing it only as cheap eats rather than a source of pride. That's why this fight isn't just about history. It's about reclaiming memory, dignity, and the right to own what was created. So when we ask, why was black food erased from American history? The answer is theft. Theft of names, recipes, credit, profit. And the erasure wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Through branding, through publishing, through laws and stereotypes, black food was separated from black identity. But here's the question that will take us into part 2. If America erased the past, what happens when black chefs and historians reclaim it? Does a nation celebrate the truth or resist it to keep the lie alive? Because in the kitchens of today, a new war is being fought. Not with chains or caricatures, but with menus, media, and money. And in part 2, we'll expose the modern battles. The celebrity chefs profiting off soul food, the restaurants using black recipes without black faces, and the billion-dollar industry built on flavors born from slavery. Black food is history, and history deserves truth. Comment your thoughts. Hit like, share this with someone who needs to know, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2.